95.1 FM, The Light, and its management. And now, to address the legal concerns of our community, AM 1310 The Light presents Legally Speaking. Here is today's host.
Good morning. Good morning to all our people on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn. Thank you for joining our show today. And also our listeners on WTLC, AM and FM. Thank you for joining. Remember, folks, that this is a live call-in show. You can reach us at 317-239-1310, 317-239-1310. Today, we have our all-star panel again, Attorney Vanita Banks, superstar lawyer, master's in tax, cyber security expert, president of national organizations, and just a super research analyst. Also, we have Attorney Milton Grimes. He's having some technical difficulty now, but Milton represented the famous Rodney King case that changed the way that we look at civil rights cases in America. But starting off, though, one of my co-hosts today, Attorney Banks, reminded me of this Tesla verdict of $137 million. It was shocking to see the verdict of the evidence that was admitted against Tesla. After I read that, I decided I'm dumping my Tesla stock. I don't care how much money I'm making off of it. I just thought that it's just a bad investment. That company has some significant racial issues that I don't think that that we should support a company that would tolerate that type of blatant racist attitude and discrimination. They call this guys the N-word. I mean, it's just outrageous what they were doing. And then we see that the CEO of the company, who's a South African guy, decided to move the headquarters from California to Texas because, quote, he liked the Texas legal environment and laws better. Well, Texas, of course, has done political gerrymandering to exclude African-Americans from voting. They enacted the most restricted abortion law since Roe versus Wade. And so I just thought that, well, it's time for me to dump my stocks in that company. And that's what I'm doing. I've had it with Tesla. I've had a phenomenal run. The stock price has doubled in the last 12 months alone. The company is a computer company, but I think their run is about to expire anyway because now the American companies are now all going to electric technology. So having said that, Attorney Banks, how are you doing today?
I'm well. How are you, Attorney Lee? And thank you for having me. It's great to be back on the show.
Attorney Grimes, are you with us now, sir?
Yes, sir, Mr. Nate. I'm with you in a society that is dominated by racism. I don't think we'd be able to do anything if we didn't interact with racial institutions, but I'm with you. Dump Tesla.
I'm dumping the stock. I don't care how much money I made. My stock value have doubled since I invested in the company. But I invested in a company based on the fact that I believe in the energy sources away from fossil fuels. So I was thinking that when I invested in Tesla, I want to go to electric cars. Now, the problem is I wouldn't buy a Tesla. I don't care what the technologies are. And so I've been waiting the introduction of the American electric cars because Tesla doesn't have dealerships like the typical American manufacturers do. And I think that's important. Ultimately, I think it's going to catch up with them. Although the evidence I've seen, other than the fact that they've had a few that burned up and exploded during an accident, right, they've had a pretty decent safety record. You know, they have a few lawsuits, but the racial discrimination thing just shook me to the core, Attorney Grimes, and I just can't support a company that has that much systemic racism. I just think that it's one of those things whereby that we should all say the heck with Tesla. I don't care how good their cars are. If they're going to treat their Black employees that way, we got to walk away.
You know, if I can say something to add a little collateral issue here. I'm good friends with the person, have known this person for 10 years, and in a Zoom meeting with several other lawyers 2 days ago, this person had in their home The Zoom now allows you, like you can see some of my home in the background, but not a lot of it. But the Zoom allowed us to see a caricature beside this particular lawyer, a friend of mine. And the caricature was a brown-skinned, not the black shiny, the brown-skinned figure of a black man with bulging eyes and thick lips. And I couldn't focus on the issue at hand, which was a serious issue, for catching this caricature. And the issue was intense, and I kept dealing with the issue because I was one of the spoken people on that issue. But I mean to get back to that person to talk to them about, do they know what a caricature, I can't pronounce that word well enough, mean to other people? It's a put down, it's a dehumanizing, it's vulgar. But I guess to them, I think it's a prized piece of art in their home, Miss Banks. And I kind of have figured out a way to talk to them about it because I can't let it go unaddressed. But there's a lot of racism in this society, Mr. Lee, throughout this society. Subtle, obvious, Texas, California, everywhere. I just wanted to get that out on this issue of racism.
Hey, Attorney Banks, I know that you were outraged about that abortion ruling in Texas. You got this scholarly opinion that shows why this law that Texas introduced is dumb as hell, and then it get reversed. How long did it take for them to reverse it at appellate court before the ink would dry on their opinion?
Just a couple of days before the ink was even dry. What we've seen this week is that the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals in Texas, that's the Federal Court of Appeals, has blocked the district court's temporary ban of the enforcement of the Texas abortion law, which you will recall bans abortion after as early as 6 weeks before many women even know that they are pregnant. And Judge Robert Pittman, the district judge, he's a former U.S. attorney, he blocked the enforcement of that bill, calling it an offensive deprivation of a constitutional right.
Well, let me ask you something. I don't get this. Lawyers file brief with the court. You get 100+ page opinion. I'm thinking that it's going to take you 2 to 3 hours to read through this opinion, minimum. And then you have to write a petition and a brief with the appellate court. I don't understand how that you could review an opinion, research it, and write an appellate brief in less than 24 hours and get it reversed. I don't understand that. That tells me there's something cynical going on here. It's almost as if there is some type of pretextual type communication between these parties that maybe I'm not conspiracy theories, but there's something fundamentally wrong when a justice system can abolish a rule that fast of such constitutional consequence. And, we've had Roe versus Wade since 1973. And what was the urgency about this law that the Sixth Circuit thought merit, ignoring all judicial precedents in terms of time constraints, and issued an order within 2 days? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Well,
I think because of the high visibility of the case, that these various courts are really just primed. It knew that there may be some type of block, and was prepared, if you will, because of the high visibility of the case. But one of the things that I don't know at this juncture is what, the composition of that court is.
Well, what happened is that under the Trump administration, out of the 600 some odd federal judges, he appointed like 200 judges in 3 years. That's never happened in American history, so he got more judicial appointments than any other president in a 3-year time period. He, for the first time in American history, he appointed a Supreme Court judge, right before the election. Didn't RBG die sometime like in October last year, or was that November? What date did she die? I can't remember.
I believe it was in late September.
And before they had her in the ground, they had nominated someone, and within 30 days, wasn't she confirmed by the Senate, Amy Barrett?
Absolutely, absolutely.
I followed that because Amy Barrett was on my day case that we won at the district court, and she was on the appellate panel appointed by Trump that threw my case out. And then when we appealed to the Supreme Court was set for oral argument. She got appointed to the court, and once Amy Barrett got appointed to the Supreme Court, despite the fact they ordered to brief it, they then declined to hear the case. It was maddening because once she recused herself, the court said, okay, we're not going to look at this case now. Although the argument that we adopted in the case emanated from a dissent written by Clarence Thomas himself. So we adopted, my Supreme Court case, we adopted a great portion of Clarence Thomas' dissent, and that gave us the 5 votes.
You made brilliant arguments. I would never think that you would agree with Clarence Thomas. This is one of the times when all 3 of us agree with his opinion with respect to qualified immunity.
Yeah, for the benefit of our listeners, qualified immunity is a judicially created defense to misconduct or alleged misconduct involving police officers back in the 80s. And essentially, qualified immunity basically says that in the line of duty, they give a lot of deference to police officers. And because of that, they get immunity from both civil and criminal liability in most cases. No other person walked this earth get that type of protection. Judges and prosecutors get immunity, but generally speaking, lawyers don't get it, doctors don't get it, people that pick up trash don't get it, but they get special protection. And so in the Day case, the police officers were given immunity for killing a teenager in the streets of Indianapolis on 10th Street, broad over daylight. And they were saying, okay, even what they did may be wrong, but they're immune from suit from both civil and criminal liability, which is a shocker. And so the point is that we open up, we're talking about Tesla and the $137 million verdict. And I looked at the appointment process. There were 8 Trump judges appointed to the Ninth Circuit. So that tells me there's a good probability that that case would likely get reversed by those judges.
Mr. Lee, are you saying or implying that some of our judges are not fair and impartial in their opinions or rulings on legal situations?
I've been watching this ever since the introduction of my practice. Historically, back in the 1800s, we had federal judges that condoned slavery, the institution of slavery. And then we had judges that say separate but equal is permissible. So our American justice system, the very foundation started with racially biased opinion. That's just a fact. It's historical data. Now, over the years, the court system got better. There was a dramatic shift after the passage of the civil rights area. And we had the Brown versus Board case in 1954, but that case took a long time to implement. In fact, the Brown case, in my personal school jurisdiction, our school didn't engage in desegregation until 1969. So 15 years later is when that was implemented. In Indianapolis, for example, the segregation order that was originally entered, I represented John Moss, who successfully litigated the case, and that case ended in 2003. So historically speaking, our courts have not been the pillow of racial diversity, nor have they been a pillow of fairness in terms of minorities. We have some outstanding federal judges, make no mistake about it. But I think that we took it turned the wrong direction since 2017. And now with the Biden appointment process, in my opinion, their process is way too slow. And there's a lot of vacancies, and they're not acting aggressive enough. For example, there are 94 U.S. attorneys offices in the United States, and I think only about a third. Well, Trump appointed his U.S. attorney, what, in about a week? You know, I mean, my criticism, and I'm a stunned supporter, is that why in the hell have a simpler type approach? What was wrong with that? If Trump did it, just makes sense. You know, they all resign, you appoint your 94, and you do that back the first week of January. So they go to the confirmation process.
I guess that's why I was so impressed, and I'm still impressed with the state of Washington Supreme Court recognizing in their June 4th, 2020, is it now, manifesto that they have been racist in their rulings for decades, if not centuries. And they're going back, all 9 justices signed off on this. They're going back and reviewing some of their cases where they have concluded the decision and opinion was racist, especially involving Native Americans. So it supports your concern and your non-conspiracy theory feelings about some of our courts.
Yeah, Attorney Banks?
And Attorney Lee, going back to Brown versus Board of Education, or one of his progenies, where the court held that public schools shall desegregate with, quote, all deliberate speed. And you just referenced cases or situations, school districts across the nation that, struggled with this, up until the 2000s. And so it's a bright light, Attorney Grimes, from the Washington Supreme Court. From my perspective, it's the right thing to do. And from my perspective, very courageous on the part of this court to ensure the rule of law, which is a cornerstone of our democracy.
Yeah. Okay, we'll take one call at this time. Call, you have a question, a comment for us today?
Hey, Nate, I'm really concerned when I heard 3 lawyers sitting in here that have already made their living here in America and already established themselves and have enough money to observe any coronavirus regulations without worrying about their mortgage or taxes not being paid, sitting in there and talking about racism. It's like complaining with a loaf of bread under your arm. Don't you think that we have, as people, enough sense to figure out our own lives without your help? I mean, if somebody don't want you in their business, they don't want you to be bothered with you. That's the way it should be. We should have our own businesses. That's a business opportunity, not discrimination. But for some reason, the black people like you guys are sitting in there now think you can come, and all you're doing is marginalizing other black people who are out here trying to conduct business, trying to make it, and just making more alienation and contempt against us. That's all you're doing.
Okay, in response to that comment, let me respond very briefly and explain to you what is erroneous about the last caller. The Blacks that came to this country, they didn't come as tourists, they came as slaves. And then after the Civil War, when they took their land, they took their dignity, they took their lives. So even after the Civil War, we had to pass through the Black codes. And we see recently, even when they were successful in building business enterprise, we saw that whites would take it away. We have a lot of examples. It's a Tulsa, Oklahoma, even in California, we saw that the state gave reparation to the Blacks that took their land. Well, here in Indiana, just recently, we had a federal lawsuit filed by a prominent bank that did redlining. In other words, they refused to loan money to Blacks to build homes and give mortgages, things like that. So this issue of discrimination, whether you have blindfolded on or not, it's real. It's something that we deal with on a regular basis, but not sacrosanct. Don't mean that we can't be successful. We have a lot of African Americans that have had great success. But on the other hand, we have historically been denied equal access to the components in society that help you become successful. It's an ongoing process. And we saw a reversal of that, whereby under the last administration, it almost appears that the country went in reverse and became more racist, or people that were racist were allowed to articulate it without repercussion. So the last caller, in terms of his comment, is ill-conceived, and rest assured that this racism is a real problem.
I like to just add on to that. I made a comment at the beginning about this friend of mine that I have to talk to about having that caricature in her location there. Those are things that are important to me because some people still don't realize what racism is all about. I remember reading the book Robert Lee and Me by Ty Sidor. And he talks in that book about the meetings and decisions that have been made around this country throughout history for the exclusion of Black people. And if we don't continue to talk about this issue until we eradicate it, we are going to suffer from the institution of racism, sir. And that's obvious. So I won't say I'm offended by your caller, but I think it's naive on his part for us to think that racism doesn't exist or it doesn't matter. It matters a whole lot.
It does. Okay, let's take another.
I just wanted to say that throughout my entire career, I have always said that, we needed to have in this country, a candid conversation about race. We're finally having that conversation, right. And it is not pretty, right? And many of us have been successful despite those barriers. And those of us around this table have committed our careers and our success to advocating for those who are voiceless in our society. We believe that that we have an obligation to lift as we climb, and that lawyers are natural leaders of our society, and we have to advocate for our people in our communities, and that is African Americans, Native Americans, and people of color.
Right. And what came out from my reading of that book was that this man was saying, you can watch it around the country. I mean, there's this code, there's this language between white supremacists and racists that every time there's an advancement in civil rights, you'll see another award being given or another celebration for the Confederacy happening, not just in the South either. They have a language to say, they make one step forward, we'll make two steps forward. We're going to keep this supremacy position intact. So let them laugh and think that they've gotten Martin Luther King birthday. Well, we'll do something else to honor the soldiers of the Confederacy or racism. So this thing is not over. And I think we ought to remove as many statues. And I'm still asking you, Nate, is that statue in the center of Indianapolis or with the man on the horse and the slave down kneeling? Have y'all got rid of that statue yet?
I don't know. I'm going to go and take a look tomorrow.
But it's important.
I wanted to just make one last point, too, that it cannot be denied that there is not equal access to education opportunity, housing, healthcare, and social justice in this nation. And from my perspective, those are the four components of civil and human rights in this country.
Okay, let's take the next caller comment. Caller, you have a comment for us today.
Yes, good morning, Attorney Nathaniel Lee and your panelists.
Good morning. Speak up a little bit louder, please.
Yes, all of this is textbook. Everything you're talking about is in the textbook. In fact, the pushback came in, I think, January of 2020 when the Board of Education wanted to teach in the classroom that the foundation of racism started back in 1619 when the slaves came over, and that the plight of the black man, we have been subjugated underneath these codes and things of that nature, Jim Crow, and all of that, and it's been the basis upon which we have been held in place. And every time that there is some sort of advancement in our race, there's something or another group of people come and they piggyback on it and they advance, and we're yet in that same position. Now, anyone who is saying that they have never, or this is not true, that racism does not exist in America, is someone who has never, ever tried to do anything, because if you try to go to college, you'll find it there. If you get a federal government job, you'll find it there. They'll say that you're not able or capable of handling certain things. And so therefore, you'll have an entry-level job for 30 years and retire right there, unless you do something about it. And as a result, if you do something about it, you're part of a class action suit to identify the disparate treatment in the workplace, then you're labeled there because you have got the EEOC to help you to be promoted. You weren't promoted on your own merit and all those kind of things. It's people who have never tried to do anything or tried to advance themselves or make themselves better, to have these opinions that racism doesn't exist because you're in a small circle and a very narrow-minded individual. But all of this is like the Trumper. Though he's out of office, he's done enough to raise up this group of people who are pro-white and anti-black.
Well, hey, caller, address the comment made by our last caller who basically said that because we're lawyers, we're making excuses we should not be, and though the racism doesn't really exist. Address his concerns real quickly.
You know what, I cannot, because it's just ignorant. And I cannot, I won't allow myself to go there. I just can't do it.
Well, sis, I'm gonna have to disagree. I'm gonna have to disagree with you, young lady, in this regard. We just had a brother that has a radio station out here in California, Larry Elders, who ran for governor of, we tried to get the recall of our governor. And I think he knew some of the stances that he took was anti-black, but he did it for political gain and for selfish motives. And I think a lot of the Trump huggers and supporters African American ones did the same thing. So I don't believe all of them are those who have not tried to get ahead. Many of them are just people who want to exploit a situation and be looked at a certain way so that they can get ahead. That's my 2 cents.
Said in the beginning that he's done enough to put strike fear in the hearts of those who don't want to side with him. Because you can't tell me you got 20 people locked up in prison because of you. I'm talking about Trump, and you have not done anything illegal, okay? And they're in there because of you. But there's people are scared. They're scared, and especially if they're Republican and they're black. You know, they want to be on the right side of history and all that. But I'm afraid some things you have to take a stance on. And racism is racism. I don't care how you look at it, how you flip what coin over to one side to the other. Racism is racism. And it yet exists and is alive and well. And he put life back into it. And made people think that we can go back to 1969 and nothing has happened. There's too much bloodshed that's taking place in this country for us to go all the way back.
Well, thank you very much, caller. At this time, our producer on the local radio station will take a short commercial break. On YouTube, we'll continue the discussion. Go ahead, producer, take the break. Now, our YouTube followers, we don't take a break. We're continuation of this discussion that's so relevant, but it started off by the fact that the Tesla company got hit with a substantial verdict for blatant racial discrimination, $137 million. That's a lot of money to an individual on a single claim, but the conduct was pretty egregious. And you had a jury who looked at the evidence, looked at the credibility of the party, and made a decision based on that evidence. And but my concern was that when I saw what the company was doing, I made the decision that this is not a company that I should invest my money in, no matter what type of profit it was making for me. So I'm dumping the stock in because I don't like the South African CEO's stance on any of this stuff. He decided to move the headquarters from California to Texas because he didn't like the social stances, which included in Texas blatant racial discrimination on the concept of gerrymandering. They're trying to now do a voter recount or some type of voter audit of the areas of Houston and places that had a large African-American population. It's insulting. And so for a corporate director to take that position is not a company that we should do business with, particularly in people who are fair and reasonable. I urge you, dump the stock. You know, don't buy any more of those Tesla cars. And this person needs to be brought down because he's not being fair. You know, that's my take on the Milton.
I got several friends with Tesla cars, and they, you know, they think they are supporting a more liberal existence. I'm sorry to hear that.
Well, I particularly noted that $137 million jury verdict in San Francisco. It may be the largest, if not, of course, if not one of the biggest verdicts in a race discrimination case in history. It is likely to be appealed, probably already appealed, Attorney Lee, and it's likely that verdict will ultimately it's possible that verdict will ultimately be reduced. But the plaintiff, Owen Diaz, who was an elevator operator, and I believe he may have been not an employee, but an independent contractor, which is even more interesting in terms of this verdict, if what I've read is correct. But he was subject to a horrible and disgusting hostile work environment where he was subjected to racial slurs and racial graffiti, the use of the, barrage with the use of the N-word. racial graffiti and cartoons placed in his workspace, as well as, in the bathrooms. Just a pervasive, hostile work environment. And interestingly, Attorney Lee and Grimes, the verdict included $130 million in punitive damages and $6.9 million for emotional distress. And that is a huge statement by that San Francisco jury.
That is, that they found some malicious conduct somewhere.
Absolutely.
Well,
so that punitive damages verdict, and of course, punitive damages are intended to punish and deter despicable conduct that they found pervasive in the Tesla workplace. And this is not the first case. There was a previous verdict of $1 million, and then class action litigation filed on behalf of numerous African American employees that have complained of demeaning treatment in the Tesla workplace.
Yeah, I was looking at the summary. There's a pending class action lawsuit in Alameda County, California, called Vine versus Tesla. Said that Tesla is rife with racist discrimination and harassment. So now we have they've gotten away with this because they have binding arbitration agreement that is tilted in favor of the company who pays the arbitrators, apparently. The problem we're dealing with now, though, is that we have a corporation in America who now is the wealthiest auto manufacturer in the world based on the stock prices, who are based out of control. The only way we could fix this situation is that we have to stand our ground and dump their stocks right away, and then not buy their cars. Buying the cars, get rid of it. Because as a practical matter, we can't support this type of misconduct.
He has become an American hero, hasn't he? Is this Elon Musk? Isn't that his name? He has become an American hero. He's off into space, and he's got people signed up for that trip with him. Isn't that one of his projects?
Yeah,
absolutely.
But he support blatant racist policies, and what concerned me, what first got my attention is that he was moving because he liked the social policies better in Texas and California. What a social policy is to prevent blacks from voting, to deny women right to make decisions about their own bodies. I'm thinking, is he out of his mind? These laws that Texas are trying to establish, they're blatantly discriminatory and sexist.
And back to your point about arbitration, in this case, the plaintiff, Mr. Diaz, had not signed an arbitration agreement. Mm-hmm. And that may have been due to the fact that he was an independent contractor. I'm not sure. But in so many cases, as you know, employers have implemented arbitration processes which limit the options that employees have with respect to, advocating their rights, as well as many times those arbitration settlements are not public. So employees are not even aware, that these claims are being adjudicated.
Well, I've never had arbitration verdict ever made public because as part of the agreement, it's a confidentiality. So the employees or the plaintiff sign that agreement and it's binding, and so we saw that with the Trump. Now let's go back on the line and take one more call. Call, you have a question for us today or a comment?
Nate, how are you?
Great.
Nate, this is
yes.
Your world's greatest super driver, buddy. Ron.
Yeah, so what's your comment today, Ron?
My comment today, Nate, of course there's racism, At 64, I grew up in the South in Florida, I had my uncle handcuffed and beaten down in my grandmother's house by the white police. So yeah, there's racism. However, Nate, at 64 now, I believe that, things there have been some changes. Maybe not as much as we would like, but I tell people, if you recall, we used to be property. We are not property anymore. We now own property. As a matter of fact, I would probably venture most of you all own your own homes. Aside from that, I try to tell people, be encouraged in the face of racism. Do the best you can. Damn the racism, but do the best you can to get yourself ahead. There was a young lady I think I heard a moment ago saying that, you start out in an entry-level job, and 30 years later, you're still there. If you are, I believe that has a lot more to do with you than it does to do with racism. Because almost all of my friends have retired. A lot of them have retired and went back to work. A lot of them actually work out at Fort Harrison. It depends on what you do and the effort, in some cases, the effort that you put into your life. I have been called the N-word probably twice in my whole 64 years. Once when I was in the military, and once when I was traveling and got lost in Wisconsin. They told me to get my N-word up out of there. But as a rule, I still tell black people, be encouraged. Don't let racism stop you from doing anything that you would like to do. I just want to tell black people, be encouraged. And I want to.
Hey, Ron, there's one thing you said though that's quite. Hey, Ron, there's something you said that I want to clarify that people need to know. When you say a lot of your friends at the military, the U.S. military was the first American institution to desegregate in 1955. So the military led the effort in America to desegregation. Like in Indiana, for example, we have a history of the KKK back in the 1919s and 20s. Half of the card-carrying members of the KKK were in Indiana. Now, but our court system in Indiana, our Supreme Court, has always been a model to try to fight racism. It's just an oddity. Our Supreme Court enacted special rules in this state to avoid the consequence of the KKK. We had venue rules and things like that. And then our Supreme Court later on adopted a rule that would end discrimination. If lawyers engage in discriminatory conduct in this state, it is actionable misconduct, which is we're one of the first courts in America to adopt that. So I see what you're saying. So we've had some shining stars in certain part of our national economy and our judiciary here, but overall, we see that when blacks apply for mortgages, they can't get loans. We had the situation here whereby we discovered that when people are trying to get appraisals in their home, they have black pictures in their house is worth less money. So all these things affect the ability to be successful.
Nate, can I get in?
Go ahead.
Nate? Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead, Ron.
Friends in the military. Pardon me?
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
In addition to my friends in the military, I was going to say, in addition to my friends in the military, I play golf. Almost all of my golf buddies are retired GM, Ford, auto workers. It's hard for me to believe that a lot of us believe that there's just no way for black people to get ahead because of things that may or may not have happened. In some cases, yes, there was probably a lot of racism at some time. But Nate, almost most of the people that I listen to on the radio, they almost all own their own homes. The Tina Cosby show, she owns her show, owns her house. I'm sure the Dion guy who owns or runs the radio station. You can come up in this world. Just apply yourself. Yes, there is racism. Let me say that 10 times because people act like I don't say that. Yes, there is racism. I say, damn the racism, full speed ahead.
Okay, thank you. And we don't disagree with that because, but it's our job. We're not just lawyers, but we're also social engineers. I think that because the lawyers blessed me to have a certain amount of success, that it's important that I try to lift other people up to assist them. So with that in mind, that is why we have these discussions. we talk about issues, and then we talk about remedies. And but it's important that we have these discussions, particularly this moment in time in history, because now we're in a situation where there's a lot of judicial vacancies in the federal court. And one of the things that Attorney Banks wanted me to do was go over the process of what they're doing now. And I'll go over that very briefly, because we're likely to have a couple of vacancies in the federal courts here in Indiana, and I'll be able to walk through the process. But the problem is that we have to act quickly, because in the midterm election next year, if we lose one senator and end up with 49, although we have like 48 plus 2, I don't know yet, we lose the ability to appoint federal judges. And so we experienced that during the Obama years. So keep that in mind. Now, Attorney Banks, back to this Texas issue, because I'm just curious, how was it possible to get a scholarly opinion over 100 pages reversed in 2 days? I've never heard that before.
I can't answer that, but the appeals court ruled that the enforcement of the law, the original law, the abortion law, which that's Senate Bill 8, which bans abortions as early as 6 weeks before many women even know that they are pregnant, that the enforcement of that law, which was blocked by the district court, will continue until at least Tuesday. So there's going to be more proceedings early next week, and I'm following those closely, Attorney Lee.
Wow, it's terrible.
So the original law is being enforced, and its effective is retroactive back to the time where it was blocked by the court. So there are certain hospitals and clinics that had resumed providing, health care to women, and now they may be subject to suit.
Okay, this is getting crazy. Let's go back to the line.
It is. It's real crazy.
But Nate, I'm not so surprised as you are about the fast overturn of this, because I've seen as recently as last year in doing a post-conviction case, I've seen the Court of Appeal here in California rewrite the facts on a case to support its rulings. So it can happen
in 48 hours.
So they just knew what they wanted to write. They knew what they wanted to say.
Wow.
I think they anticipated it.
Yeah.
Let's take one quick caller, because we have a few minutes left. Caller, you have a quick comment for us?
Yes. A plethora of things come up in you people's conversation today. So I do find difference with your last caller about racism is not the major problem, because it seems like to me that he was taking a Marie Antoinette approach to this. When the people in France were rioting because they didn't have bread, she said, let them eat cake. Just because the oyster of friends that he knows is able to get out and enjoy the fruit of their labor after they retire, it seems to me that this is like an 80-year phenomenon, that people work for GM, Ford, Western Electric were given government contracts. The government contract made those companies hire African Americans. This is not a new phenomenon. This is built into our Constitution. The original Constitution did not allow for slavery, the original draft. But because the southern states raised so much cane from 1781 to present day, the liberal parties at that time have capitulated and allowed the Southerners or the 1%ers or 3%ers to get their way all the way up to this day. So if your panel could, comment on that, I appreciate it.
Okay, one last caller that had an urgent message. We'll get this and then we'll close out. Okay, caller, quickly, 1 minute or less. Go ahead.
Yes, Nate, this is Guy calling. And real quick, could you at some point discuss the merits of the so-called mechanics lien when it comes to reparations? You know, the concept of mechanics lien, work done that's not been paid for.
Okay. A mechanics lien filed by a vendor is a statutory remedy under the statute. If it's a homeowner, as a general rule, I just do litigation. That's not an area I practice in, but you have to file it against homeowners within 30 days. And I think there's a longer period of time against businesses. A lot of people miss that 30-day on homeowners. But then it gives you the right to file a lawsuit. Most of the mechanics liens are less than $8,000. You can still file in small claims court to collect on the debt. But as a general rule, once you file a lawsuit, about 9 out of 10 of those cases settle right away. But if you have problems, if you're a corporation, you should always hire a lawyer. But in any event, back to our panel here. One final comment first with Attorney Banks.
Well, with respect to the caller's last point, I'm not sure about the quote lien, mechanic lien concept, but in the same way that wealth can be inherited, debt can be inherited. And the reparations due African Americans, it's been calculated, and I am hopeful that the reparations legislation will continue to move forward because the time for reparations is now.
I agree with the young man's concept of mechanics lien. It's a legal debt that America owes to Black people for the work they have done on their home, on their institutions. And conceptually, I understand that, and it should not be objected to just because of the years that have passed. But I think reparation is a similar concept, sir, to the caller as mechanics lien in a situation.
One final comment, reparations was paid to Native American during Obama years. There was a $6 billion set aside for reparation. Also, they got special contract as a Medicare subrogation, but they've not done the same thing to the Black community. Although the $6 billion was maybe a small sum for the mass loss of property and death, but that was a start. Now, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for listening today. I'd like to thank all our callers. And next week, please join us as we engage in legal issues of the day. I'd like to thank our standing superstar panel of Attorney Banks and Attorney Grimes. Thank you all, and may God bless you. And if you haven't got vaccinated, make sure you do so. The life that you save may be your own. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee.
Thank you.